Okay, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create a wall material, which is going to be a very simple and fast way to do it. So first things first, tone mapping, disable ACS output. And for this tutorial, I'm using a dummy scene with the studio lighting. And I did disable fast preview denoise during interactive rendering. All right, so let's just go to our material library. And let's just create our first wall material now. We're going to use Corona legacy material, not the physical one, right? Because this is the original one. This is a new one. So we're going to be learning how to create materials in physical one later on. But for now, I did still, like I said, I did still find some downfalls with it, some bugs and slow rendering times. So, but I don't have any issues with Corona legacy material, so let's just use this for now. And it's perfectly fine to use this because other people still use older versions of Corona, etc., etc. So this will work all the time. All right, so what is a wall material? So I'm pretty sure you guys have different kinds of approach how to create a wall material, but honestly, to be honest, in my 15 years of experience working in CGI, freelancing, and working for companies, most of the times you're going to be creating very simple, new looking wall materials, right? So it's not going to be like a leaking wall from water, stains, scratches on the wall, etc., etc. So it's going to be a very simple, new looking wall, right? So let's just start from the first one, which is going to be a very basic one. So I'm just going to select my object here and I'm going to apply let's just do, I don't know, a beigey color, right? Something along these lines, right? So very quick, if you're doing a floor plan, which is literally rendering a top-down floor plan view, I wouldn't recommend adding anything to the texture. You can literally just apply a color. By the way, never go, completely black 0 or 255. Always stay in between, 4 and 200. So something like that. So never go very black, etc., right? Because you need that dynamic range, and I was explaining that in my previous tutorials. So let's just, do it very, very simply. So let's just create a wall material, which is going to be something along these lines. So I would use this approach even if you're creating a white material, put it at 180 maximum. That's going to be your, and this is what I'm talking about, highlight areas, right? So you don't want to, overexpose those areas too much. So either you will, improve your lighting a little bit, or you will, make the texture a little bit darker, so to say, or color, right? But as you can see, if you right click on this one, you still have some space. You're not killing this color completely. If you take a look at sRGB color, it's 253, 253, 253. Now I wouldn't go with that, but because we have a light source there, so I could literally go to my HDRI map and just, output this to maybe 0.6, and that will correct itself by 239, 239, 239, as you can see. So this is perfectly fine. It's not gray, but if you're gonna apply post-production later on your image, this area here is gonna bump up. So it's gonna be a lot more whiter, so to say. So if you're creating a very simple, white material, I would use from 160 to 180. It depends from your lighting. I wouldn't go 200 or above. So let's just create the most simple. So this is going to be almost, all the time for a floor plan. Now, if you are rendering a floor plan and you have a very small space, let's just say a one-room space, and you're zooming into that floor plan very close, right? Because sometimes you have like an office space, so you have to zoom out from the floor plan very far away to, take everything into one shot. Now, if you're gonna be looking this closely, or you're gonna be rendering this at, let's just say, I don't know, 5,000, 8,000 pixels wide, I would start doing this. So for example, let's just say I'm going to apply this I don't know, desaturated a little bit, like a beigey color. I'm gonna go with 140 for now. I'm gonna apply on my object, and I'm gonna start increasing. So now for the wall reflection, I wouldn't go too crazy unless you have some kind of a reference, and my numbers would be 0.45 to 0.7, something like that, right? It really depends, you know, what is the paint there, right? So, but let's just say most houses are gonna have something like along, you know, these lines. It's gonna be very matte paint, right? So it's like a drywall paint, right? So this is what you're gonna be after, so to say. This is the most simplest thing. And the thing is, if you're not gonna be standing next to a wall very closely, let's just say, you know, the wall is literally not in your face behind the camera, this is perfectly fine. This will work. You're not gonna see any bump maps or anything like that. Now, if you are having a specific wall that has a displacement or something like that, yes, you will be starting adding bumps, glossiness, reflections, displacement, you know, whatever you name it. But for simple white or beige walls or just drywall paint, you know, this is more than enough. So basically the settings are, you know, the color, a little bit of the reflection. You can go to 1, but I wouldn't recommend. There's no point, literally. IOR, I would leave it to 1. Glossiness 0.5. That's perfectly fine. I wouldn't go 0.3 or something like that. I think the minimum for a wall would be 4.5, something along those lines. And that's pretty much it for a wall material. You don't really need to do anything else. Just play around with the colors and you will get your result. Now let's just move to a more complex material. So I'm pressing shift and moving that there. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start showing you guys some bump maps, right? So usually, you know, dry painted walls, they have, you know, they have some bump map to it. So for example, I'm going to choose, let's just choose this one, right? So it's a bump map there. So by the way, this map is seamless, so you're not gonna see any seams. So I'm just gonna open this in the preview and show you what I mean. So there we go. So it's a very, very tiny texture, as you can see. No, well, the texture is not tiny, but the black speckles are very, very tiny. So I'm just gonna chuck this into the bump, and let's just see how this will look on the viewport, right? So I'm just gonna do this. Double click, bam, and I can see the speckles there. So I'm going to increase the tiling a little bit, and I'm going to remove the pyramidical and move to some there. It's going to be a sharper result, so to say, and I'm going to move this to 0.5, right? So basically what I'm doing is you know, taking off the blurriness from the texture, right? So it's going to be, you know, a tiny bit slower to render, but you're gonna have to, you know, you're gonna get a higher quality, a crisper texture from further away from the camera. So I'm gonna apply that, and now I'm gonna try to explain a very important thing. So I'm just gonna be rendering this at as you can see, this is interactive rendering. I'm not denoising it in real time, and you know, we are starting to see something, right? So now this is very, very important. You think that, you know, if you're test rendering your images at, let's just say 1000 pixels or 2000 pixels, as you can see, this is a very small resolution, so to say. At 1000 or 2000 pixels, you will start seeing detail, right? But never do this mistake as I did, you know, when I started doing CGI. Usually I tested my images out, you know, 1000, 1500 pixels with the bump map. And then, you know, after I'm happy with that, blah, 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 I used to send it to the final resolution, right? Without even checking the bump map on a final resolution, right? So for example, I'm testing now on a test resolution, which is, you know, the interactive is gonna downscale to your frame buffer size. So I'm just gonna move this to 4000 by 4000, right? And I'm gonna press not the interactive rendering, but the production rendering, right? So I want to literally see a region, what I'm gonna see, right? So it's gonna take, it's gonna load in the geometry, the texture and everything, and it's gonna, you know, start rendering the final resolution image. And if I'm going to zoom into, as you can see, it's 1 to 4. If I'm going to zoom in, it's 1 to 2, 1 to 2. And the scale now, I'm zooming in to 1 to 1, right? And this is what I'm talking about. Imagine if you would be standing next to a wall, right? And you're shooting, I don't know, a bedroom, I don't know, but your camera is, let's just say on the right side, you see a little bit of that wall, right? So what you're gonna start seeing in that 4K image, that bump map is just way too strong, right? As you can see, this is way too strong. It's just too bumpy, right? So, and if I would decrease the tiling, you would see it even better. Now, so my recommendation would be, for you to always double check this. Now, if you're going to be rendering this texture, this bump map in a full HD, for example, an animation, you will see this less. So the detail is going to be less visible, right? But if you're rendering a CGI, a still CGI, you're setting an interior and you're rendering this at final 4K by 4K or whatever, right? You will start seeing, the bump map acting a little bit too much, too intense. So my recommendation would be to always test a region render, right? And I would say drop this number to 0.2 or something like that, right? So I'm going to render this, I'm going to render a new region there. And you'll see the difference, right? So you basically, you don't want to see the bump map that it's too intense, because in reality you're rarely gonna get a wall that bumpy, especially in the new build houses. So this is what you are actually looking for, right? So you can see the bump a little bit, but it's not it's not in your face. It's there, but it's not. And in reality, if you're living in a house and I don't know, someone dry painted your walls not a long time ago, you can definitely go check very close how bumpy is your wall, right? So I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as bumpy as it was before. So it's just developing this kind of a taste and understanding what is too much and what is too little, right? So I just canceled the render. And by the way, if you don't want to see black re-renderings, what you need to do is go to system and clear frame buffer between renders. So the next time, if I'm gonna unclick this, the next time I'm gonna drag a new region somewhere there, this region is gonna stay. So I'm just gonna press render. And so I'm gonna now explain a little bit about the scale of the bump maps, right? So as you can see, this region here remains. So I'm just gonna press cancel for now. And in regards of the walls, right? So what are you looking in regards of the wall? So for example, so let's just say you have a wall behind, right? An internal wall. So let's just say, it's gonna be 250 height. The width is, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. We don't really have the scale of the room. And let's just say the thickness of the wall is gonna be 10 centimeters. So I'm just gonna apply this wall material there, right? And as you can see, some people don't really feel what is the scale, right? So say they apply a texture and they use the UV map, for example, box mode. And let's just say I'm gonna put usually what I'm sorry, not 800, put 80 80 80 for example, for this texture, right? So this is what you're actually looking for, right? So something along those lines. And obviously every texture is gonna act differently. If you have a smaller texture, smaller speculars, you might go higher with this number. So let's just say it's gonna be 200 by 200 centimeters. But if you have a bigger texture with very small speckles, you're gonna have lower. So you're basically increasing the tile. So this is what you're actually looking at, right? So for example, a human size, it's a very good, like for example, my height is 189, something like that, right? So but let's just take something like average, right? 175. So this is a human height, roughly, right? An average. And you're looking at these kind of a speckles. So if you would zoom into with your eyes a little bit, this is what you're gonna be roughly seeing. And I wouldn't put scale of something like that, because this is just unrealistic. And especially in new built internal walls, I wouldn't go with a very big tile map, right? So this is roughly how you create a wall material I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Obviously, this is more than enough. You just need a bump map and you need, you know, a reflection, sorry, not reflection golfins, and you need just a color, right? Now, I'm just going to show you a couple of more things which you can do. So, for example, and it's a very easy and fast approach. So I'm just going to copy this guy here. And in this option, I'm just going to use this two different colors, but I'm going to mix them with the dirt map or whatever you want to call it, black and white map, right? So in this example, you can use either Max Mix or you can use Corona Mix, which is here, right? So in Corona Mix, if you want to use two different textures or colors, doesn't really matter, you have to choose Mix. Obviously, it has a lot of blending modes here, but if you want to work as this one, you have to choose Mix, right? And for example, I'm just gonna go, I don't really need to even plug a color. I can just choose a color there. So let's just say I'm gonna copy this color there into the first lot. And I'm just gonna drag with my left mouse button here and press a copy. And I'm gonna make it darker, something like that, right? And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna load a different texture, which is black and white. It's like a dirt map, right? So I'm gonna put it there. And actually, I'm just going to show you a quick comparison in between these two. They're going to work actually the same, right? So I'm just going to paste that there and plug that guy there. So I'm going to maximize, and this is what you're getting. As you can see, it's completely the same thing. You know, if you are using just a mix, I would advise using just a mix, because sometimes when you convert to V-Ray especially, it's just going to be easier. It will understand this easier because this is, you know, original Max mix modifier, so to say, a node. And this is Corona, you know, and sometimes you can have issues with, you know, converting these nodes. So we can use this perfectly fine. So I'm just gonna plug this into the diffuse and I'm gonna check this over there. And what I wanna do is I'm gonna show this in the viewport. As you can see, I'm just gonna choose my camera. There we go. So I'm just gonna press interactive rendering, remove the region and increase my frame buffer. There we go. And this is what you know you can get, and you can control this, you know, in any way you like. You know, you can have different colors, like for example, you know, if you're making something along those lines, and you can, you know, copy this guy and make it either to the lighter side, either to the darker side. Really depends what you're trying to achieve. But sometimes you can get very nice effects, you know, on these kind of, you know, like a, it's not like a dirty wall paint, but it's, you know, it looks a little bit more interesting, so to say. So this is one. You can use a mix. You can even use, you know, bitmaps here. So you can use bitmap A, bitmap B, and mix them up if you want to. Now, let's just create another one, which is going to be a little bit more different. So let's just say a more fabricy material, right? Now for the wallpapers, so let's just say I'm going to plug some kind of a wallpaper, right? So I'm just going to copy this guy. And let's just say we're going to choose this guy there. So as you can see, this is a wallpaper material. It's a little bit more like a fabric material, right? So something like that, as you can see there, right? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying a color correction. That is like 95% what I always do, because I always, you know, adjust my materials in max, straight in max. So for example, I'm going to desaturate it a little bit, make it more dark, something like that. Maybe desaturate a tiny bit more and increase the contrast. There we go. And now you can do this both ways. You can make it look like a roughly like a fabric, but I'm going to talk about fabrics later on. We can just apply a little bit more reflection onto it and, you know, increase the glossiness there. So that's perfectly fine. So 4 or 5 is perfectly fine. We can go maybe we can go 5, I think, and maybe decrease the reflection a little bit, or let's just go to 4 or 5 and see how it looks. So another very important thing which you can do is literally copy the color correction, right? And just desaturate it so you would understand this a little bit better. So what you're looking at is 200, and maybe increase the contrast by something like that, and just literally put it to the bump map. And let's increase this to 0.5 and see how that's going to look. So I'm just going to show this in the viewport and apply onto my object. There we go. And as you can see, the orientation is a little bit wrong, so I'm just gonna double click that, 90 degrees. There we go. And yeah, and that is pretty much you know, you can play around the reflection glossiness if you want to. Now it really depends from the, you know, reference wallpaper that you have, but you know, if you're not entirely sure, you can plug this into the reflection glossiness, for example, literally the same thing, and what you can do is mix them up. So you're going to be using 50% of this, you know, black and white texture, and you're just going to be using, you know, so to say, a solid color 50% of this, right? So this has no texture, it's just the color. Imagine this, right? But this guy, you're plugging in a texture, right? So you're taking 50% of this and 50% of this value, color value, so to say, right? So 0 is going to be completely black and 1 is going to be completely white, right? So you know, you can do something like this. And by the way, same rule, if you are creating, you know, a testing story on a low resolution, I would recommend testing this on a, oh, by the way, I forgot one thing. Let's just double check. 05 some error, that's perfectly fine. So let's just render a production rendering, which is going to be our 4x4K resolution, and see how it looks. So this texture should look a lot more crispier and you know, better, so to say, as you can see here. So I'm just going to increase the size a little bit there. There we go. So as you can see, you get a little bit of that glossiness reflection from the map, which is working perfectly fine, because sometimes some areas are going to be, you know, a bit more, so to say, darker or more reflective, and some areas are going to be more glossy reflective, some areas are going to be more matte reflective, right? So a very, very simple approach, so to say. I'm just going to not denoise it, but you know, you get idea, right? So basically you can end up either with a texture only and with the bump map if you need to. And you know, if you want to spend a little bit more, so to say, rendering time, you can plug this into reflection glossiness, because, you know, the render engine is gonna, you know, take time, obviously take a little bit of an extra time, not too much, you know, to sample those areas, so to say. So you're, whatever, the more things you're plugging into the material, you know, the longer, so to say, is going to take to render. Now, I'm not going to say that, you know, if you're going to plug this into reflection glossiness and let's just say only with the bump, it takes you 1 minute to render. I'm not saying that, you know, only plugging this will take you 2 minutes to render. No, not really. It can take, you know, just a millisecond to render or whatever, right? We're talking about a lot of materials in your scene that are complicated. That's when it starts to add up. Now, if you are rendering, you know, translucency materials, fast SSS like in V-Ray or etc., right, that has subsurface scattering, etc., that's a completely different story. That will add up dramatically, right? But if you're creating a simple material and you're adding a little bit of, you know, reflection glossiness, etc., either way you're using reflection glossiness there, so it's not really going to add that much, right? But just keep in mind that the more things you plug, you know, then you want to plug a blend material, and then you're plugging, you know, another 2 materials with some masks. Just keep in mind that, you know, you're adding things, extra things to render, so to say, right? All right, so let's just create a different wallpaper here, a very simple one. So let's just go to here and apply this material onto my object, show this in the viewport. And as you can see, you can see the beauty of the color correction always plugged in, because you can literally, you know, change so many things, right? You can change the hues a little bit, so to say, or desaturate it a little bit more if you want to, something like that, right? Now, I wouldn't use this as a reflection glossiness. It makes no sense completely, because, for example, this wallpaper is, you know, it's going to be as flat as possible. You might have some bumps on this, on these ships or boats, whatever you want to call them, but most of the times, like, you know, a wallpaper like that, you know, will be flat, completely flat. So I wouldn't even use this, right? So in regards of the glossiness reflection, that's perfectly fine. Let's just try to render this guy out. That's perfectly fine. And I'm just going to remove the region. There we go. And this is perfectly fine, you know, if you want a little bit more of that reflection, because this wallpaper should be a little bit more reflective, so to say, you know, you can increase this even to 1 if it works for you, right? Because it looks like a more like a paper wallpaper. It doesn't have any like bump maps, etc., right? All right, so what else I could show you with the wallpaper now? By the way, keep in mind these maps are seamless, so I wouldn't see any seams going around, right? So a seamless map is basically, you know, if it cuts somewhere there on another side, so if the boat is cutting there, that boat is going to be extending on the right side. So I'm going to be showing you that, how to do seamless seamless textures in the future, but for now, you know, I'm just trying to show you guys how to make a simple wall material or wallpaper. So I'm gonna give you guys a tip. So like I said, I've been working in this industry for 15 years now, and 90% of the times, if you're going to be working with new build houses, real estate, interiors, etc., right? Usually what you're going to be creating in regards of the walls is going to be, and I'm talking about interiors exclusively right now. You're going to be creating white matte walls. You're going to be creating, you know, some colored walls as well. And you're going to be creating wallpapers. So a wallpaper will have a texture like this one, for example, right? So that is pretty much it, right? If you're gonna have something very, very specific, obviously you're gonna have to recreate it. But like the majority of the times in production-based companies, you even freelancing, you will not be creating, you know, some kind of like a game-looking, complicated wall material, right? So for example, for exteriors, like let's take a brick material, right? So yes, you might be applying normal maps, you might be applying some displacement maps as well, just for the brick to look better, etc. But also it depends from the material and the look that you're trying to achieve, right? What kind of a sample do you have to follow, right? So another thing about normal, so a lot of people still don't understand this, but if you want to create, so let's just say I'm gonna take I don't know, this one, right? And I'm gonna just copy this texture here and plug into the bump, and I'm gonna apply into my object. There we go. And what I'm gonna be doing now is going to Corona normal, right? And I'm gonna double click this and go to my folder, and this is a normal map that I'm gonna use. Now before double clicking, always choose this to 1, right? Gamma 1, always, right? Because only then it will start working correctly. Now Corona has, so I'm just gonna unplug this because that's not gonna work. So Corona has this obviously fixed, well, not fixed, but they invented this kind of an option. So for example, always try to import your textures with gamma 1, sorry, normal map textures with gamma 1, only normal one. So, but let's just say you have this imported like this, right? So, sorry, let me just use the automatic, for example, and I'm gonna import this again. So as you can see, it's gonna become incorrect, right? So if you're gonna plug this there is a setting add gamma to input. So basically this is kind of the same thing, but I did this manually, you know, instantly. And only then you can plug into the bump map, right? So then it's gonna apply, as you can see, it starts to get bumpy, right? Usually normal maps are cheaper to render than the bump maps, but like I said, it's not gonna add so much unless you're rendering, you know, completely everything with bump maps. And this is perfectly fine as well. So, you know, when you're rendering, by the way, this is not a gaming engine, right? So use the bump maps freely, perfectly fine. It will render just fine. The most expensive thing to render is displacement maps. So be careful with displacement maps, but normal maps or bump maps, don't really, you know, worry about it. It's perfectly fine. Now, as you can see, either you check this if you imported it wrongly, or you uncheck this guy, right? As you can see, it gives me an error that is wrong. So you can plug this guy in, and if there's no errors, it's gonna work perfectly fine. Or if you import a model, and you know, if let's just say you bought a model from 3D Sky or etc., you import in your scene, you press render, and it says gamma is incorrect, right? So for example, it says something like this, right? A normal map appears to be using input blah, blah, gamma incorrect, right? Blah, blah. So what you can do is basically, you know, let's just say press stop, and you can go to Corona Converter and use fix Corona normal incorrect map of warnings. You press this guy and it will fix all of the incorrect normals into your scene. So basically what he's going to be doing is he's going to be applying this checkbox automatically, right? And it's going to fix that issue. And whenever you're going to press interactive rendering again, it's not gonna give you that error because that checkbox is gonna be on. Now with the normal maps, it's, you know, you can even apply additional bump maps. So for example, I would apply this bump. So sorry, very quick. So if you wanna, if it doesn't render, just click on the map and press letter U. It will, you know, refresh it. So with the normal map strength, it really depends. You can control the strength here, right? Or you're leaving this number here and you're controlling literally the bump map, which is this one, right? So 1, 2, 3, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna increase this to a very insane number so we could see, you know, I'm not gonna render this at 4K because it takes time to load and blah, 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 right? So as you can see, you know, it works perfectly fine. Now, you know, I can go here and put this to 3 and you will see even, you know, bigger results, so to say. It's just getting literally, and it's really hard to see now. So you can also plug this into additional bump map, but this has to be a bump map, right? So for example, I'm gonna put this to, you know, very low value, for example. Let me just show you a quick test, right? Sorry, not actually not, let's just put this to 0.5, right? So as you can see, 0.5 is working, you know, along these lines. And now look what's gonna happen. I'm gonna try to increase this to, you know, crazy numbers. And as you can see, it's increasing the bump map independently from, you know, from this value here below. So just so you know, right? So, you know, if you have a nice, good quality normal map, by the way, there's a lot of bump maps to normal converters online. You can, you know, there is a couple of them you can buy. There is a plugin even for Photoshop that you can convert. But like I said, don't really bother with going and spending time converting, you know, bump maps to normal maps. Really, you don't really need to do that, right? Unless you're working in the gaming industry, you know, normal maps is a thing. But in CGI, if you have a normal map, great. If you don't, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it, right? It's not like a big deal, right? All right, so what else in regards of the wall materials? I think that's pretty much it. Another very, very important thing to notice. Now, let's just say I'm gonna start with a very simple, well, I don't know. Let's just pick, for example, this one, right? So I'm gonna click that guy there and copy this guy. And I'm gonna apply it to my object. Double click, bam. And I'm gonna press interactive rendering. And as you can see now, it's perfectly fine. But let's just say sometimes it's a very, very rare thing. But let's just say you're living in a country that, you know, the designers are, you know, it's a cultural thing, so to say, right? So let's just say you're living in China, right? And their cultural color is red, right? So for example, let's just say we're making a red interior, a red bedroom. Let's just say it doesn't really matter what, even if it's an exterior, some kind of exterior part, right? Look what's gonna happen if I'm gonna press on the red. By the way, I would never recommend doing this, which is 255 color, right? Intensity. I would go, you know, somewhere around here, right? That's gonna be my maximum, right? And for the intensity, I would even put this to 245 or 250, right? Because keep in mind, when you're going to be applying contrast in Photoshop, etc., that 240 color is just going to be contrasting itself and it's going to be becoming more saturated. And you can always apply adjustments like saturation, vibrance, etc., right? So don't really, you have to leave a little bit of space for you to, for your raw CGI to work better in post-production. You cannot go with, numbers like 255 and 255. This is just overkill, right? Literally, this material is radioactive for now. So I'm gonna go with 180, and I'm gonna go to, let's just say 248 for now. I'll just leave it, very red, just for the sake of this tutorial. And as you can see, obviously this is not a big deal, right? This is a sphere there, and I can see a little bit of the red illumination there. Sorry, global illumination, right? So basically this color, the light is, this color, this wall or this ball is absorbing the light, and the light reflects this and bleeds out as a red, bleed, basically as a red color on your white walls, etc. So I'm just gonna show you a bit more a better example. So let's just say I'm gonna put this, let's just say this is an interior wall, right? Bam, there we go. So I'm gonna go to my camera and I'm gonna apply that same red color, right? Bam. And I'm gonna press interactive rendering. And as you can see, this color starts to bleed to my, as you can see, I can see the red there, I can see the red there. And let's just increase this to the maximum, right? Let's just say 240, right? And put this to red, there we go. So this is on an extreme, right? So keep in mind when you're making an interior, let's just say, and you're applying very, so to say, vibrant colors, right? And let's just say you really need to have them in your interior for some reason, right? My recommendation would be when creating these big objects like walls, dominating walls with these vibrant colors, always to use the ray switcher, right? So how it works is basically you plug this guy there, and you plug this, so reflection override, you will plug this here, because if you have a mirror in somewhere in your room and it's going to be reflecting that wall, you're going to see that wall into that mirror reflection. Plug that there, because that's what you're going to see, and that's what you should see. Now, if you're going to be standing your camera in front of some kind of a glass bottle, and you're going to be looking through that glass bottle into your red wall, you will see that red wall here, right? So you're not changing that. And if you're going to be standing with your camera in front of that wall, you're going to be seeing this directly. Yes, you plug that there. Now, for the global illumination, we don't want this color, so we're gonna plug this red color. You're gonna bleed out this reddish color. So what we need to do is we just need to plug in a very neutral color, which is gray, for example, right? Imagine these walls are gonna be, you're implementing I don't know, 160, right? You're gonna plug this here. Now look what's gonna happen. As you can see, it's bleeding a lot, right? You can see a lot of red going on around, right? So what we're gonna be doing now is we're gonna, select our objects, and I'm gonna apply this guy there, and you'll see that this red bleed is gonna go away completely. Bam, there we go. So this would be my recommendation to always do it, and you can go crazy right now, right? Let's just say we're gonna, put this as a green color, something like that, right? And as you can see, I'm not getting any, by the way, never go with these kind of colors. I'm just showing this for, example purposes. So I wouldn't never go with this kind of color, right? It's just radioactive basically. But, look what's going to happen if I'm going to apply only that guy. So as you can see, there's so much bleeding going on from the green color. Now, keep in mind this, if you need to get that bleeding color into your interior, that's perfectly fine. Don't use this. Or what you can do is, for example, take this color, copy this, and if you need a little bit of that green bleeding into your interior for some weird reason, you paste that color here, right? And it's gonna start giving you the same thing, and you just desaturate a little bit, something like that, right? So, bam. And basically, what's if I'm gonna, apply this ray switcher, basically what's gonna happen is, you know, you're gonna get a little bit of that green bleeding, but not that much, not so much. So if I'm gonna do this, as you can see, it's so green, it's less green, and we're not getting any bleed at all. So I hope that made sense. Walls should be always, you know, as simple as possible, because keep that in mind. If you're rendering big interiors, you're going room to room to room, especially if an animation or something like that, you're seeing always, you will see walls all the time, right? So if you're going to be making very complicated walls, very reflective walls, right? So, you know, a lot of reflections going on, textures on top of textures, blending maps, etc., etc., that's gonna add up to your rendering times by quite a bit, right? So you need to, you know, you need to try to keep wall materials very, very simple. You can apply some bump maps, a little bit of a bump maps, you know, you can apply some you know, some maps in the glossiness. That's perfectly fine, but a wall material should be always, you know, simple, so to say, for production work. Now, if you know, if you're working on your personal project and, you know, that house or interior is going to be very, very unique and specific, and the walls are going to be stained and, you know, leaking water or whatever you can imagine, go nuts. All right, you can create blend maps on top of blend maps, you know, displacements, anything you like, anything you want to experiment with, please do. I would advise to do it, because, you know, you will be experimenting with your skills a little bit more, so to say. So, but for production work, this is completely fine. And I think I can't explain all the scenarios. So very simple walls, you know, floor plans, you don't really need to add anything to the floor plans. If you're rendering just the floor plan, you know, if you already made an interior and you're using a slicer, you know, to remove the ceiling and render it out, you know, leave as is, obviously leave as you have already. But if you're only creating, you know, floor plans, don't really, you know, try to, you know, create walls that are very complicated. There's makes no sense, basically. And yeah, I think that is gonna be it for this tutorial, and I think I covered pretty much everything. Very simple approach, but some people were asking me how you create wall materials. Very, very simple, guys. You don't really need to invent anything more difficult, right? Because it's just gonna be faster to render, easier to work, recreate, etc., right? So yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in my next video.